No one comes to work and says, today I want us to fail. How many people can we take out now with AI? I actually believe it's also a lot about the collaboration between the human in the loop and AI.
Hello and welcome to On the Right. I'm your host, Apoorv Agarwal. Today I'm extremely excited to welcome Lucretia Löscher. She's currently the Chief Operating Officer of a $2 billion top-line agriculture engineering company, the Big Dutchman. Before that, she was the Chief Operating Officer of thyssenkrupp Uhde and held several leadership roles at companies such as Siemens Energy, and OSRAM. She's a professional athlete and a mountaineer. She's climbed the insurmountable Aconcagua mountain in Argentina and Mount Vinson in Antarctica. What's the one signal you look for when something is about to go off track?
It's sometimes just what is not said, the lack of transparency.
What's tougher mentally, a boardroom or a mountain?
The mountain can be very challenging. If you see the risks, you can evaluate them properly. Sometimes the boardroom is a bit more unpredictable.
Speed or precision?
Speed. Instead of having a 100% solution, sometimes 80% is good enough, and keep going.
Lucretia, thank you so much for joining us. So excited to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here on your podcast.
I've had a lot of executives on the show, and what's different here is that you're also a professional athlete and a mountaineer. So one thing I'm very excited to chat about is leadership and adventure sports and how they go hand in hand. Also very excited, you've of course seen a lot of capital projects throughout your career. And of course, how can we not talk about artificial intelligence? Clearly, you're a believer. Before getting into all of that, I know you have an extremely inspiring story. Would love to hear what have been some of the key points of inflection in your life that, if I may, made you on the right to lead such large organization and manage such important projects.
Technology is such a fascinating field. It is driving innovation. It is making the world better. This eagerness, my ambition to drive impact, I really believe it comes from when I was very young. And that's something where a lot of people have perhaps a different perspective on the world. But I'm from East Germany. We lived in a country that was not free. Perhaps the Berlin Wall was built in 1961. I was only born in 1982, so I was a child. I did not understand all the complexity of the politics around, but I was able to observe my parents, and our family was clearly not free, neither free to cross borders, nor did we have the freedom to speak and to say what we want. And I think in 1989, something magic happened, and normal people like my family, my dad, my sister, went on demonstrations. They fought for being free. And while there was a lot of danger from the regime, from the SED party at that point in time, from the communists at the end, there was a lot of threat there were shootings. Everyone was still driving the momentum and walking and demonstrating each Monday. And finally successful on the 9th of November of 1989. Although I was so young, it taught me that everything is possible, that normal people can achieve a lot. And this whole element of freedom to decide what I want, freedom to study what I want, because that wouldn't have been possible in the old regime. Neither my sister nor me could have studied. So all this was possible because we believed it's possible for me, and I try to give that back to my companies.
So it sounds like one of the underlying themes, in your journey has been this motivation to have freedom, freedom to speak, freedom to do whatever your heart desires, and a lot of energy that you're, of course, exuding out in the world. And that energy obviously translates into you, going up these, massive mountains where, especially Aconcagua, which is 7,000 meters, over 22,000 feet tall, and I think the last 1,000 is extremely, extremely tough with very thin layer of oxygen. Would love to hear a bit more of your journey from that point, like after 1989, what happened and how did you find yourself? Like how did you maneuver through some of the pivots and found yourself in this world of capital projects, let's say?
I studied business and law simultaneously. In parallel, I worked full time. I always need an alternative way to gain my energy back. So a second part of me that recharges while doing sports. And it started very basic. A friend of mine took me on a small mountain. It was not a very exciting day. It was rainy. We were shivering from the cold, and we didn't even make it to the summit. But we were close to nature. I recognized the beauty of the mountains. That's also nice when you live in Munich, you are close to the Alps. Yeah, from this experience onwards, I learned to climb mountains step by step, a bit higher.
When was this?
This was after my studies, actually, when I already worked in Siemens Management Consulting in Munich. I think that is the beauty of both business and also sports. You don't have this instant award. It requires endurance. It requires a continuous investment. And then you can also see the reward. So stepwise, I got better. And then I climbed the highest mountain of Germany, Zugspitze. And especially when then people look at you like, you're a climber, the stouting from outside. It is somehow also still motivating to prove that you can actually do it. Yeah, and then out of the development, at some point, the highest mountain of South America's Aconcagua, such a beautiful mountain, such a nice country, great people, is actually a challenge, not only because it's a very high mountain, it's the altitude that causes a lot of people not to make it to the summit. There are two aspects of it. One is the high altitude sickness. People get symptoms on the way and then you have to stop. And the other thing is what you already said, the thin air. So you are at around 37 to 39% of the normal oxygen density at the sea level. And your whole body is recognizing it. You're super slow. You need to focus because also your thinking is slower. And at the same time, your brain is constantly telling you, you don't get enough oxygen, slow down, go back. And to breathe and to continue one step after the other. You are very close to yourself. And I enjoy this experience to focus on the moment. To be honest, sometimes in business, that's the same, right? You have a problem in front of you. You need to act quickly. You need to focus purely on the facts that are in front of you and figure out how to solve the problem. That's why I think it's actually two sides of a coin.
Yeah, it's easier said than done. And I want to dive a bit deeper on that. I'm curious, how does leadership and business feed from adventure sport and vice versa? What is the symbiotic relation between leadership and some of your expeditions and adventure sports?
I think the beauty of being an executive is that you have the chance to lead people and to make sure that you guide the people, that you have wonderful people, experts, to achieve their very best. We are in a very dynamic world, and leadership is of high demand at the moment. So what it for me means is that we know the direction, and I think my strategic background helps because strategy is the first step to identify, okay, where do we want to go? And then to help the right people to go on that journey with the whole company. Keep the agility to correct the course if we recognize that something changed. And that's the same for a project in the EPC world and also the business as such, where we have to make sure that with all the dynamics externally, but also sometimes internally, and the competition that is there, that we set a agenda and that we communicate so that all the disciplines know what to do, that sales knows what to do, operations knows what to do, HR knows which skilled people we need. And this orchestration, that's also leadership. Yeah? Because a lot of times I hear, you didn't communicate the strategy well enough, or we actually didn't understand it. So doing that, making sure that we leverage the thousands of people in our organizations, that is leadership for me. And clear communication is exactly what you need in team sports. If you are on a mountain, if you are standing at a narrow ridge and you are the two of you, then you need to know, okay, who is on the left, who's on the right side? And when do we go, when do we stop? What is a manageable risk to take? It's just that in business, I hope at least often it's not a life and death situation. But then on the other hand, looking into chemical plant engineering and also the exposure our teams have to a sometimes dangerous environment, it is actually also a life and death decision that you take. So a lot of similarities.
How do you bond the team to come together, trust one another, give them a clear mission, all of them moving in one direction? You have very little oxygen, right? So the mind is slow. It's not like thinking clearly, thinking properly. And even then you're having to make these decisions, which can obviously change the course of things. Any specific things that come to mind which have influenced or governed the way you've led teams in business?
And it's, of course, sometimes difficult to say which part of my life influenced the other.
I see.
The hen and egg problem.
Yeah.
Strengthening your senses is something that is extremely important on the mountain. You need to see, you need to sometimes smell, you need to listen to your body, your intuition. And listening is probably one of the skills that is completely undervalued also in business life. Sometimes you sit in these project reviews for the larger projects, and while the project manager is presenting all the milestones achieved, all the challenges addressed, you still need to read between the lines, and you need to be sensitive about what is not said. And it's about this confidence that I share with the team. We're all sitting in the same boat. There are no hierarchies. There are, of course, hierarchies, because at some point someone has to make a decision and has to take the responsibility for the decisions taken. And sometimes that's the executive, sometimes it's the project manager, and sometimes it's someone else. It's important that we are open to each other, because then we can react early. That is definitely something I try to embrace, and the faster we react to what we see, the better. That's partially from my expeditions, partially also because I was in the shoes of my colleagues, right? Since I was young, starting at a very basic level, working for Porsche, doing guided tours through the factory, you want to be treated nicely. People should be kind, and I want to give the same back to my team. And if you embrace trust, and if people have the feeling they are safe, then they also speak up. They raise problems early. People that have perhaps ideas how to mitigate, they raise their voice, and then we can do the best. Because I truly believe people come to work trying to do their best. No one comes to work and says, today I want us to fail. It's not magic, it's just being a human.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So Lucretia, with that, would love to, you have such wealth of experience managing large projects, managing large teams. And I keep hearing again and again that a lot of these large capital projects run over budget, run over time. There's so many things that can derail a project. Many of these are natural causes, like I'm sure COVID created a lot of chaos now with geopolitics and wars. So these are root causes where, technology really can't do much, and that maybe where AI can step in and help. What have been some of the root causes that create these projects to go over budget and over time and derail them somehow?
Yeah, perhaps we start with what are actually these projects we are talking about. They can be 100 million, they can also be $10 billion worth projects. And these projects last 3 to 4 years, go through phases like you start with the technology selection. So let's take a chemical plant project. You pick the project, you have a targeted technology, and then you start with the engineering. And in some cases, it's a pre-feed if the technology is not as mature. And then you have the the detailed design, and then there's a very important dynamic between engineering and procurement. One of these important intersections is where projects can fail, and procurement and logistics to get all the equipment to the site. And another important part is the construction itself, where the plant gets built. And don't forget also the commissioning, so that we actually have the first time to run the plant and to prove that whatever is promised as a output is then also delivered. So, and then of course the customer normally takes over and operates the plant. So in these projects, it is a typical triangle of optimization. You want to deliver the project on time, in budget, and in the right quality with all the quality parameters that you promise to the customer. You can already recognize from the complexity that a lot of things can go wrong. Typically, events that impact supply chains, there is a extremely critical link between the engineering and the procurement. And there's also a very important element, which is making sure that the feed is done well, so that the whole concept of what you want to build works and makes sense. Yeah, but let's assume that is taken care of, the process engineering has done its job, then depending on how much customized everything is, procurement has an extremely complicated job to basically share all the details, the equipment sizes, and the prerequisites on material with the suppliers. And that is where you can lose so much time. And before COVID, just to give you an idea, this process was taking a couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, and now sometimes it's double the time. Yeah, and then you have the long lead time items. Also, this phase can be very different depending on the demand. Compressors or also transformers were equipment that in the last years had extreme fluctuations in lead times. And logistics is another big topic that can go wrong. So if you want to orchestrate all this, you really need to have great control about a lot of activities that have to run in parallel. That's why for these projects you have several levels of schedule, which takes care of all the thousands of line items and tracks, where they are, when they have to start, when they have to reach a certain stage, and when most often the item has to be at the customer side. So this orchestration is done by the team with the help of the line organizations, and the better this collaboration works, the more engaged everyone is, the better the outcome. Yeah, and we have seen in the last years, not only because of COVID or some logistical challenges, but also because of loss of competency in many companies, that there was an increase in non-conformance and an increase in delayed schedules, more conflicts at customs, and it's that's a risky business to be in, and to optimize all this, to foresee the dynamics, to also pre-plan, to accelerate schedules. That is where you can differentiate yourself from competition. And that is also where I believe in some of these cases, technology can actually help us, because in many cases it's a manual process. Expediting is highly depending on our teams also to make sure that changes on the way are addressed in the right way. So I think their technology can help us and to be better and to be faster.
The life cycle of these projects is extremely long, right? Starting from concept selection to early design, then eventually getting it to FID, and then the execution part, where you have these three components: engineering, procurement, and construction. And wish they were all linear. While you're engineering, you need to start, to your point, ordering long lead items and so on. And of course, if you pick the wrong material or somehow the design was wrong, end up procuring something incorrect. Now that's a huge cost.
Correct.
Now between the EPC and the client, then who bears this cost? A totally different discussion. And procurement, and then eventually kind of construction, right? So massive teams, coordinating, we're talking like global supply chain, big teams doing all of this coordination. And then there are these levels of schedules that you mentioned. What if something arrives late on site? Now, how does that change the rest of the schedule? I keep hearing that engineers keep changing the design even while people are in construction. So as an outsider, to me, it feels, wow, how have we been able to do all of this coordination, right? So successfully, even without AI. In the end, refineries are not blowing up. In the end, bridges are not falling. But to your point, it seems like this is a world where there's huge amount of human coordination and information overload. A lot of data being created, a lot of data to manage, a lot of information needs to be passed from one person to the other. And one challenge you already mentioned is, of course, supply chain challenges and logistics. And I'm curious, like, as you, from your experience, as you think, a project, let's say you initially thought, oh, it'll go on for 4 years, but then ends up going for 5 years, or initially you thought we'll be able to finish this for $1 billion, but ends up going to $2 billion. I'm hearing some of these projects go all the way to $5 billion. That can be kind of the cost overrun outside of supply chain. Any other root causes that come to mind for you, which make these things go over budget and over time?
The whole EPC world is exactly trying to find a way to mitigate all those risks. Yeah, a lot of these projects have budget overruns and time overruns, and I would just also include the customer perspective, because the customer has signed up for a project and is willing to pay a certain amount and expects us to deliver to these conditions. And in the course of the project, everyone knows, the customer, we and also our suppliers, that things will happen. There is not a single project that is executed exactly the way how it is planned. Yeah, and the coordination is also a coordination of several teams. So sometimes changes come from the customer due to good reasons. Sometimes changes come from us because of a design change. Sometimes the supplier tells us he's not able to manufacture in a certain way with a certain material and suggests alternatives, and then you have to adjust other parts of the design perhaps. So there are a lot of elements that can change. And there's this human element that you mentioned. That's why you have hundreds of thousands of hours of work included in these projects. And of course, there is already technology, software in place that helps, for example, the different engineering disciplines to coordinate each other, to inform each other, and to hint if there are any conflicts in the design. But there is a wealth of new things that I see coming with artificial intelligence. And I also believe that especially the way how the different stakeholders are engaged, there is a lot of potential to do better and to react earlier.
Amazing, Lucretia. So that was very helpful to understand kind of what a project lifecycle looks like. And because clearly the amount of human coordination that goes in, the amount of information that's produced, like I said, it's shocking that we've been able to manage all of that without a lot of technology. That's a nice segue into talking about AI and technology. And I sat down with a lot of executives, and of course, there's a lot of talk about AI, but seldom I find executives who take out time and put in the effort to actually get some hands-on experience to learn about AI. Even though you're having to travel between Munich and Boston, you decided to take this executive course at MIT and actually roll up your sleeves and build AI models and more deeply understand what AI can do, cannot do. Would love to hear maybe a bit about the course and a bit about the motivation behind it. You don't need a super deep understanding of AI because you're driving strategy, you're driving, managing the board and driving innovation and so on. But would love to hear a little about, one, the underlying motivation and maybe a bit about the course.
It started beginning of last year when I got more and more messages from consultants that wanted to offer projects, AI projects to me. And I always get nervous if I have the feeling I can actually not really judge which of the offers is valuable to my company and which not. So this lifelong learning includes that I like to have skills and that I want to understand things to be able to evaluate them. And I was able to generate my own agents at that time that can summarize transcripts nicely and structure my to-do list. But, AI is so much more. And I looked up which are the programs that are the best, want to learn from the best. And MIT and, also other universities, of course, but MIT also stood out and offered a 7 months senior executive program, which bridged the gap between business and technology. So it included both the deep technology and the understanding of the different types of artificial intelligence, and then also application to business. And that was exactly what I was looking for. And the investment, I think, is worth it because it's not just another technology. It's really revolutionizing how we run businesses. We need to think about our processes. We need to think about where do we have problems that we could not solve so far. And then think about how AI and which type of AI can actually help us. The program as such, of course, also had the big advantage that you get to know smart people. The professors are amazing. And also my cohort with the different experiences from all over the world was an amazing source of inspiration. And I think what I can take away is you need to start with the problem that you try to solve. Don't start with, I have this wonderful AI here, so how can I throw it on business and help myself? No, it's really understanding what is the problem, and then to think about what is the state in which the company is, because we want AI to have accurate results in a business environment. Yeah, so especially in the business in which I am, with a lot of engineering involved, in some cases, we need to have very exact outcomes. And a lot of companies did not think about data and how to structure data earlier. There is a lot of data. A lot of people have Excel files in their own laptops and not even shared with the whole team. And there is a wealth of knowledge in companies, but it is not really available in one place. We need to think about data management differently and in a much more organized, orchestrated manner. I worked for Siemens, and Siemens was embracing Industry 4.0 decades ago. But I don't think a lot of companies really have achieved full automation where it is possible. And in many cases, we recognize that some of the additional productivity does not require the edge of artificial intelligence, but requires automation.
Yep.
And there are things where already today artificial intelligence can help. I mentioned the supply chain challenges earlier that cause a lot of coordination effort. And for example, one element that I showcased during the course and also as one of my assignments was how estimated time of arrival prediction could actually help our organization to react and to change, for example, the means of transport in order to make sure that equipment arrives on time, where you take available information from the suppliers and the history of performance, and the system predicts there is a high risk for delay and prioritizes for the colleague. Still, the colleague will make the decision. Once we have achieved a certain level with AI, then we can take the next. So instead of jumping to a system in which you need perfect data, start somewhere where we see we can solve a problem and then take it to the next level. Don't try to revolutionize the whole company in one instance.
Yeah. One, start with the problem and not, hey, I have this cool agent, where can I use it, right? And in the end, many times it's not about the technology. The incentives need to be aligned. Technology can bring in productivity, but from a business sense, it may or may not be obvious to increase productivity, in one part and not the other, right? Think about what's the right technology. It's all about data. So if the right data is not available, trash in, trash out. AI in the end is not magic, right? And so it's crucial to think about, as you're thinking about where to apply it, think about the data strategy that goes along with it.
Yeah, and perhaps one aspect also to mention, because in a lot of cases people ask immediately, so how many people can we take out now with AI?
Yeah.
I actually believe it's also a lot about the collaboration between the human in the loop and AI, and how we can leverage the time of the person better, and how his job can be optimized and supported with the data available. And also AI comes at a cost. So in some cases, a certain task may be even cheaper if it's performed by a person instead of by AI. So finding the right balance is, for me, a very important takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, it's not necessarily getting rid of people, but usually, and this is true for any technological revolution, right? ATM machines as an example, where the bank tellers, their role was just to exchange check for cash. But then after the ATM machines, their role changed to be more customer facing, to build a relationship with the customer.
Yeah.
Right. So the point you're making is how can we change the role of a person and enable them to do their job much better using technology. Clearly, you have a lot of experience in the world of executing these projects, managing large projects, and now you've gotten hands-on experience using AI, understanding it, and you believe that AI can actually leave the labs and help EPCs and help this kind of business. What are the different opportunities? What are some of the low-hanging fruits you see AI solving when it comes to the world of capital projects, executing these projects, and so on?
I would perhaps start with something which is very tangible, and we talked about change management already. I think, and these projects have thousands of pages of contract. Whenever there is a change coming in, especially if it's from the customer or from the supplier, figuring out how to deal with that change. Is it actually initiating a change claim? And how much of this change is actually already included in what we signed the supplier up for. So all the digestion of what it actually means, there AI can facilitate, because you have the contract, you upload the change, and the system will analyze how much of what is in the change included is actually already covered by the contract or not, and what are the consequences. So a lot of paperwork can be accelerated through AI. Another element which I find super helpful is if there are some pre-works done at the supplier, like a welding, and you want to make sure that it has the right quality by analyzing the welding as such. For example, even with recognition with pictures that you take, and the AI compares it with an ideal welding quality, you can ensure that some hidden quality problems pop up early at the supplier side and don't only come up once the piping is installed at the customer side. And it goes on with things like document management, where it's a lot of work and it's a complex process, and you have so many different versions. And that is also something where AI can facilitate. Also, this whole element of knowledge management is something where AI today has a lot to offer, not only to structure existing knowledge, but also, we have a lot of countries in which we face a demographic change, where we have not enough young people that can take on all the expertise from older generations, and to make sure that all this knowledge, all this expertise is captured and also maintained in the company is an extremely important strategic task, and something where AI can almost like job shadow already today to capture all this knowledge.
Definitely. And that's one theme actually I keep hearing again and again from executives. A lot of experienced people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience are now retiring and leaving the organization. So how do you institutionalize that knowledge? And one of the things people are noticing is by putting AI into the workflows and having these experienced people give feedback to the AI, you're actually able to do a bit of knowledge transfer and get, and get the AI model to start learning from that experience, and gives you an opportunity to actually institutionalize that knowledge. Correct. Right? So that's one of the key points and key motivations to actually start embedding AI into workflows. But yeah, to some of the other points you mentioned, some of the obvious low-hanging fruits like document management. Right? Who wants to go through a 1,000-page document and see which page is missing, right? Or, oh, we don't have the right logo in the right location. Who wants to do that? No human wants to do that. No engineer wants to do that, right? Like welding, quality control of welding books. In the end, welding is an extremely important task, and something gets welded slightly wrong angle, and now you're having to rebuild, so some part of the plant, which of course can again cause delays and things to go over budget.
Especially if it's layered and it's just not easy to access. Exactly. And then it's leaking and is also causing a safety issue.
Exactly. Right. And you told me once that, hey, actually, if you think from an investor standpoint, usually high risk, high reward. But this is a unique business where there's high risk. You can really bet the house and then go bankrupt if you take on the wrong project. But the reward is capped. It's not like, the reward is infinite. But as we zoom out of this or think about the vision or the bigger picture, right? What's your vision? Do you feel like AI can step in and transform the EPC business and then maybe help both kind of reduce the risk a little, but then help increase the margin? Or what does the peak look like for you in terms of the EPC business and AI kind of coming together?
Especially in business to consumer, we always talk about more customization with AI. I think on the business to business side, it is sometimes the other way around. We come from chemical plant engineering being an extremely customized way of working, because a lot of the elements that have to be considered to build a plant are influenced by temperatures, humidity, earthquake factors, and other elements that are very specific to the situation where the customer site is located. And that increases the complexity significantly, because a lot of the elements need to be designed first, engineered completely before the supplier can start procuring the material and then start manufacturing, and then we have the whole logistics behind. What we can see and where AI can also help is twofold. I think we need to challenge the approach to have everything customized, and I can say in my last role, I'm very proud that my team in the core of thyssenkrupp Uhde, the ammonia business, both for green ammonia but also for blue and gray, my teams have identified a core of the technology, so something which is not directly related to the location, but more related to the technology, where we standardize the core plant and we're able to engage with suppliers for more standardized equipment. It's a huge support to speed up plant design, but then also procurement and the whole supply chain. And this part, of course, is also an interesting area for AI to understand the PNIDs, to understand the whole technology, the mass balance, the process design flow, and use AI to have perhaps an 80% version of it. And instead of 100,000 of hours of engineering, our colleagues may only need to spend tens of thousands of hours. Yeah? And that can not only reduce the cost, it can also, you talked about risk, can reduce the risks, because it's much more predictable if you can pre-plan. And then you can focus on those parts that require customized setup. Yeah. And I think that is one very important lever, and requires, of course, also some support from the customers, because they may not have the full range of flexibility in terms of, for example, output. How much output should a plant have? But can then pick from certain outputs. And but they are also motivated, because for them it's as difficult to deal with delays and also somehow with cost overruns than for the EPC.
Definitely. Standardization.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. And which is interesting, right? People believe every project is different and unique. And of course, projects have their unique aspects. But it's worth asking the question, is 80-90%, the repeat of what we've done many times in the past? And can we borrow kind of the experience, the P&ID, standardized drawings, standardized suppliers, leverage the same supply chain we used previously that, worked well and so on. So it sounds like that's how you would define maybe, the top of the mountain in terms of marriage. If AI can step in and help EPCs standardize some of their work, that this can really both help increase margins, but more importantly, reduce risk. And then now we can hope that the projects are, delivered on budget and on time. Wonderful. Awesome, Lucretia. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Of course.
Let's do it. If you weren't in this industry, what would you be doing?
I love what the Bavarian Red Cross in Munich is doing, and I love the emergency services. I would work there.
Wonderful. How wonderful. Engineering or management as a path to leadership?
Management. Engineering is as important, and you need much more expertise to develop as an engineer into the senior roles, and it takes just longer. And on a management path, you are a bit faster.
Makes sense. Most important early career lesson?
Companies are not thankful. People are, and it's still worth to invest in companies, but don't expect anything. You get rewarded by your salaries, but don't expect anything else.
Yeah, it's all about the people always, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the risk you took that changed your trajectory?
Part of my training as a law student was in India, in Bangalore in 2008, which felt for me as a adventurous decision, and looking back, it was one of the best, because I connected so well to the people, to the country, to the opportunities that the country has, and it was just the beginning of continuous engagement with this beautiful country. So it was a perceived risk, not a real risk.
Yeah, I can see that. What's more important at scale, speed or precision?
It's a difficult question for a German. Speed,
yeah,
because it's just the magnitude of which we see the current developments. And instead of having a 100% solution, sometimes 80% is good enough, and keep going.
Yeah. Especially when things are changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
Right. What's the one signal you look for when something is about to go off track?
It's sometimes just what is not said, the lack of transparency. That's what rings an alarm bell.
Yeah. You can tell when something is, where there's a gap in information. What's tougher mentally, a boardroom or a mountain?
The mountain can be very challenging, but if you see the risks, you can evaluate them properly. Sometimes the boardroom is a bit more unpredictable, and that's why I would say boardroom.
Yeah, very interesting. Aconcagua or Vinson, which was harder?
The objective answer is Aconcagua is just a different experience where you really grasp for air. When I climbed Vinson, it was 6 weeks after I have destroyed my syndesmosis ligament in my left ankle, and it was a challenge because I was not fully trusting my own body. But it's still Aconcagua.
I'm surprised your sister let you do that expedition with a torn ligament.
The whole family is always concerned, but I have a satellite beacon, and I can then always text where I am. So they trust me.
Makes sense. One last one. What's in your sled for the Greenland Crossing?
a lot of things, also food and this and important other elements. But the one thing that is personal is the blanket of my dog Nila, because we will be in polar bear territory, and polar bears don't like dogs. So I will pretend this tent is owned by a dog, and will make sure that the polar bear leaves me alone at night.
Well, I hope you don't see a polar bear. Well, Lucretia, this was such a great conversation. Very much appreciate you making the time, and so many insightful things that came out of the conversation. Of course, a lot of parallels between adventure sports and leadership. This whole thing about intuition and really listening in and catching things that are sometimes not said. Also how you feel and you believe that AI can actually step in and help. But at the end of the day, what will really change the industry is more standardization. So that was wonderful. Thank you again. This was a great conversation, and what an inspiring story and journey. Very much appreciated.
I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course, the pleasure's mine.